Hey everybody. I'm at least happy some people showed up. Normally this hall here is much more busy, but I appreciate you guys coming. So today we have a panel called the ever-changing role of a publisher, and we're going to basically talk about various topics. So, one is obviously what the role of a publisher is nowadays. We're going to talk about the rise of strategic funds like Kowloon. We're going to talk about the increase of developers that are self-publishing and are using publishers basically for publishing services. And then I want to quickly dive into what it means for a developer to work with a publisher, sign original IP, and stuff like that. First, I would like to start with introductions. Maybe Sam, you can already tell a bit about yourself.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so I'm Sam from Kowloon Knight. I was one of the founding members of the team. We are a fund that was started about 18 months ago, and we provide project-based funding for PC and console developers. So we fund games in exchange for revenue share on the game only. We don't take equity of the company. We don't take IP share. We don't even take sequel rights. So it's only on that project. And yeah, I'll talk more about what we do later.
My name is Alberto Gonzalez. I'm the VP BizDev in Bandai Namco Entertainment Europe.
As you already noticed, I'm the moderator of this panel, but I'm Maarten de Koning. I'm a partner at DDM, which stands for Digital Development Management, and we're a video game agency, so we represent game developers and sometimes publishers, but mainly developers and helping them with funding and corporate strategy and distribution, other things. Giovanna?
Yeah, I'm Giovanna Villani. I work as responsible for BizDev for 505 Games and Digital Bros, mainly for Europe and Australia. So we're both publisher and corporation that has other activities.
Cool. I'm Bobby Wertheim. I work for Sega as the head of content. I work within a team called Searchlight, which is the kind of like incubation program within Sega. So we go out looking for new IP.
Great, thank you. So obviously we have three publishers here and Sam, who's representing Kowloon, which is obviously a fund. The first question I have is, what is the value, according to you guys, about the value of a modern day publisher? What do you feel in the current market where developers are sometimes being self-funded or looking for distribution? What do you feel is the value of publishers? Who wants to start first?
Okay, cool. If you want. So I reckon, this is my perspective, but you can self-publish now, and it's not like it was before, where publishers, you needed a publisher to get out there. But I think having a publisher today allows you to focus on making a great game and not have to wear loads of hats. So it's just a huge distraction, especially when you're approaching release, going through beta and whatnot, to have to then think about marketing. But if you're thinking about marketing, then you're already too late, right? So you need a partner to really make sure you maximize opportunity. That's what I think is the key thing.
That's good input.
Yeah.
Yep. Go ahead. Listen.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what you said. I think there are a lot of functions that a publisher can still make for developers, and a lot of even more boring stuff maybe from a developer perspective, like QA, localization, and especially, as you said, marketing. So you can really focus on developing your game, and still some aspects like community management that can be dealt together between the publisher and the developer. But everyone should do what is really his core thing to do and what he likes to do. And that's why publishers are still there, I think.
I fully agree with what you both said. I think that the role of a publisher or the role of a developer has changed as the industry evolves, and our forecast is that it will evolve again in the next 3 years, and it will evolve again in the next 6 years. So this is a permanently changing role. As of today, neither the hurdles on distribution, neither the hurdles that used to basically define the role of a developer or a publisher are there, most of them. But at the same time, we're facing growth. We're facing an industry which is probably going to double themselves in the next 5 to 7 years in business models which are new for all of us. And I think that the important part when defining roles is clearly to find a partnership, to find a long-term way of working where everyone can be able to do, as you were saying, what he's keen on doing. Maybe marketing is clearly more on the publisher side. Maybe there are some support that you don't need to give to have as a developer, or maybe not. So I think that one of the keys for this changing role is the flexibility that a publisher must be able to provide.
Yep. Sam, anything to add? I mean, obviously you're not a publisher, but anything?
Yeah, I mean, publishers still relevant, still bring a lot of value in terms of marketing, PR. Also, publishers have fan base, so they usually leverage their fan base across different titles and all of that. So that's obviously a good way, good value when you work with publishers. Of course, on the other hand, there are some things like distribution and those things have become easier now. A lot of people are able to do those without a publisher's help. So yeah, I like the today's title is the changing role of a publisher.
Yep. And I wouldn't underestimate like physical distribution, right? I know everything is digital nowadays, but still, I know all you guys are doing physical distribution, and it's still important part of your business, right? And I think that developers are self-publishing, and I know there are a few developers out there that here in this theater that are doing that. Having physical distribution, I still think is important for like awareness and brand building and whatnot. But we'll dive into that later. So obviously, everyone concluded here that the landscape is changing and that the role of a publisher is changing. What kind of changes are we seeing then in the publisher philosophy or like approach in the current market? Is there anything, Alberto, you can elaborate on?
Sure. I think that the coming from a Bandai Namco, we have high ethical standards and we have a clear guideline about how we want to address the market, and this basically allows us to partner, or to at least try to partner with people that can follow up or can follow how we think things should be done. We have a policy on content, we have several policies, and basically what we would like is to establish long-term partnerships based on trust from the very day one. And that's something that has changed now. This is not anymore, in my opinion, about clarifying roles, which probably in 3 years will be different. Maybe some of the roles that today a publisher is doing tomorrow will be clearly on the developer side. Maybe not. Maybe it goes the opposite way, and specialization and the fact that publishers do have these services available allow them to provide costs on a much more efficient way. And that's something that we really need to have in the beginning when we set the relationship with the developers, because some things that we say today in 3 years may be dramatically different, and we need to be able to address these changes. That's something that for me is key. So what we're looking here, we're looking for talent. We're looking for partnership. We're looking for high ethical standards. This is more on the side, of course, aligned with creativity, aligned with all the KPIs that you need to put into a project, and aligned with whatever other milestones you want to set into an arrangement. But I feel that that's also something that it's mechanics that we can do. I'm much more interested in the first part of this equation.
Yep. Bobby, anything to add? I mean, obviously, Sega owns a lot of internal studios as well, so that's also a very important focus for you guys. But anything you want to add there in terms of like the publishing model and new market approaches that you have as a publisher?
So I've only been in the game industry 10 years, so I can't really comment on what it was like a long time ago. But what I can say is that today, with the kind of, and a lot of the stuff that Alberto was saying is totally on point with the way we approach, and it is, the key word is the partnership approach. And so we always look to, because whenever I go to talks, and I don't know, sometimes I just hear kind of developers kind of going, oh, publishers label, right? As a label, it's like, oh, they come in and they take the creative vision, or they change the release date at the last minute. But that, I've never seen that happen at Sega, and it's always been a partnership, and we're in it together, we're one team, and we're deciding what's the best thing to do considering the situation that we're in today. So we're both on the same kind of level, and we're just having a discussion, right? Like a really mature discussion about what's the best thing to do. So I think that partnership thing is really key. From the sounds of it, like, you know, the horror stories you hear, it sounds like in the past it wasn't really that. It was more of a top-down sort of approach. Maybe, I don't know. I wasn't there, so I can't comment on it.
Yep. Giovanna, obviously, 505 is doing various types of deals with developers, from fully funded deals to distribution to co-publishing or co-funding. You guys have been very proactive in forging these new relationships. Yeah. Anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I think that we're pretty much on the same page, which is coming from different publisher. I see that we are converge on same kind of feelings. The developers today have got so many different options to get to market that, you know, what can make the difference is how you step into a deal. You know, what kind of sentiment and what kind of feeling and vibe you have when you step into a deal. And both parties should be comfortable, happy, and as you said, you know, at least step in with the good vibe towards each other. Like instead, years ago, probably it was a little bit more in the hands of the publisher to dictate, you know, and even to be, you know, stronger in a way. I think now it's more about the relationship, about how you develop that relationship across years if you want to keep that for a long time. So yeah, I think it's more human-based, if you want, in a way, and I pretty much agree with what they say.
Did marketing and PR change for you guys as traditional publishers? I mean, for example, we all know that now influencers are really important, streaming is important. Obviously, at each company you have a very experienced marketing team. Did that change a lot, for example, at Bandai Namco?
For sure. I mean, we need to address a market which is changing, which is very different from what it was 5 years ago, and which will probably be very different in 5 years. So an important thing I believe in terms not only marketing but some more other issues in the industry is timing. Now, you were mentioning before, boxes are physical distribution is still there. Yes, it is still there, and we don't forecast that it will suddenly decline or suddenly disappear. Actually, it's still there, and it will be in the same side of new platforms, which will be digital and streaming and subscription models and everything that is coming to the industry. And of course, this means a different marketing than the one that we used to have when this was just basically, as we were saying 10 years ago, a console-driven offline experience. So yes, it's very, very different the way we are approaching marketing and the services that we are providing to be a first-class publisher. Very, 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 very different, and on top changing. So it's not a statistic.
Exactly. Anything to add on that aspect?
Yeah. So to be like specific to what I know, in terms of previously, I think people used to spend marketing up front. But today, when we plan on marketing budget, we plan on spending marketing budget throughout the life cycle of the game, and we'll just continue to engage with the audience, you know, and make sure that they're engaging with our universe that we're creating and the experience that we're creating. And another key change that's we're doing to react to what's happening, which is, you know, it's just so much faster. Everything's so much faster now, right? It's all really instant. So whether it be community managers or brand managers, we've got them embedded in our development teams within the studio. They're physically housed in the studio, so they are part of the team and they're living and breathing it, so they can just react to what's happening a lot quickly, that they're able to express what the game is to the best of their ability, and they're part of the team, so they're not kind of like misconstruing what the game is. So all of that kind of just brings the developers a lot closer to the audience, so there's a lot more of a sort of direct communication with the community, and I think that's a huge shift to what it was a good few years ago.
Yep. Yeah, and with everything going more digital and also more developers going self-publish route, we also see a rise of a lot of agencies that only focus on doing PR, only focus on certain type of marketing, right? So for us, while we don't do any of the marketing or PR ourselves, we leave it to the option of the developer, whether they want to work with a publisher, which is fine with us. But if they want to go self-publishing route, we are able to help them to introduce them to some, you know, PR marketing agencies. And in the process, then they also get to learn how to do the publishing function themselves.
Great. So what can veteran, like corporate publishers like yourself, then learn from the unpublisher, which is basically like Kowloon in this case, or even indie publishers that have a complete different way of publishing titles and marketing them? What can you learn from that? I mean, are there like any, I mean, Sam, maybe you can talk more about how you work with publishers, and maybe then you guys can fill in as well how that works. I mean, some examples maybe.
Yeah, so again, the way we differ is that we do provide the funding, and then the developer take the funding. They can ask for additional marketing budget from us, then they can go self-publishing. Or if they want to pair with a publisher, then they can take our money, make the game much further, and then to find a publisher later on with more product ready and more bargaining power. So The reason we do this way is that I think we believe that the industry is changing so much, and by doing this way, we leave the developer with much more optionality in what they do. So some developers that want the self-publishing route now, also recently with all the platforms coming up, Epic, Google, Apple Arcade, etc., they also have the option of, okay, maybe I don't need a publisher. If I can find a deal with a platform, then maybe that will bring me enough visibility, and if I put in a bit of marketing budget, then it will work. So I think it's just the optionality that they have is much broader now. So we want to return the power to them to decide what's best for them. So when they work with us, we say specifically that on our contract that we'll help you introduce you to people, but we never make any decision for you. Yeah, and also another thing is another reason we do this fund model instead of a publisher, like a brand model, is that we want the developers and their games to capture the spotlight. So for example, the first game that we have launched is called Darwin Project. If you look up online on Google, there are many articles about the game, no mention of us. If you look at the Steam account, export account, publishers themselves, not us. Only thing you ask for is a logo in the game. So yes, I think it's good that the developer and game can get all the spotlight if they work with us, so that's a bit different. But on the other hand, I mentioned earlier, working with publishers, you get a lot of the branding and the fan base benefit that if they work with us, there may be less of that effect.
Does that mean that basically it's first and foremost now the developer that is actually being like the out-facing company that is being known for the game? Is that something you see as well when you, for example, work on a distribution deal or work on a co-funding deal, that it's first and foremost the developer that you're trying to market, or is it still very much the publisher, your own publishing brand that you try to promote?
I think that the keyword that you call optionality, I call it flexibility. Yep. And I think that that's the way to address a complex market. This market is going to get more and more complicated. The more the new platforms arrive, the new services that need to be provided to successfully be in those platforms change, the more we have instead of 2, 3, 7 options or even more. So for me, as you were saying, no, the idea is that we do partner with the right people to address this flexibility and to address the product. To one project may be very good for platform A and very bad for platform C, or for good for both, or even have an expansion. And we don't normally know this from the start. So the important point is that we are able to grow, that we have the teams, and that's what I think a publisher like Bandai Namco offers. We have the teams in place to be able to address this market. I do believe that in a truthful partnership, the parts of the contract should be specializing in what they do very well. And the services that Bandai Namco provides with these first-class teams that we have in our HQ in Lyon, I think that are clearly one asset when bringing to the relation, because we should be able to do this more effectively, and we should be able to provide this tailor-made option for the developers. Then some developers may want only a distribution deal, like we have, for example, signed with the Polish studio of CD Projekt for Cyberpunk. Fine, that's an option. We do provide in a co-publishing spirit marketing services. We do provide some things, and we adapt to what they have in order to both together make the most out of the title. I don't believe a lot, Martin, in this closed fences where you do this and the other one does that, and
no, exactly.
Who does that?
I mean, I think that the great thing of this new evolved business model is that, like back in the day, normally a developer would approach a publisher for funding, right? That was like the single most important thing that they wanted to have. Now, actually, I think we're speaking of more balanced relationships where sometimes funding is already secured, for example, by Kowloon or another strategic fund. And then basically each party is providing their own services and know-how and expertise, which I think it actually is a good thing for publishers, but also a good thing for developers, right?
Correct.
They have more ownership in IP. They're more incentivized. So is there anything you guys see from your experiences that you want to highlight here regarding this new publishing model? Or
I think, from my perspective, I think that for the developers, or in general for the market, to have more options on how to get a product to the market, unleash the creativity of each party, which is very important, because even in deals, even when you talk to potential partners, or when you find the right project, or you want to get engaged in some project, you need to be more creative or more flexible or more creative, both of them, on how you approach things. And this is from every side, from the developer side, from the publisher side.
Yep.
And at the same time, everyone can really focus on what they are good at.
Yep.
So it offers more variety, which is always a good thing.
Definitely. Anything to add, Bobby?
Yeah. Going back to your question a second ago about do you put the developer forward or Sega forward? We typically put the developer forward. So a lot of people don't know that Total War games are made by Sega, for example, and that's been under the Sega banner for quite a few years now, like 15 years plus. And so we always put the developer first, one. And in terms of the changing thing and the funding thing, I think money is so much more accessible now to developers. If they're buttoned up and they've got a good plan and they've got credibility, they'll be able to find money. And it's a matter of finding the right money, I think, and finding the right partner. I don't think Sega's the right partner for everyone. Sega's definitely the right partner for a lot of people, and we could definitely add value. But we're not the right partner for everyone, right? And so I always tell people, just go and speak to other people, speak to other potential partners, and just make sure that we're the thing, the right thing. So you've got your eyes open and you're coming into the deal knowing everything else that you can know. We typically like to fully fund projects, so it's not like if they've already got funding we wouldn't do it. But typically, to date, within the Searchlight team that I've been involved in for the past 3 years, we've only fully funded projects.
Is that because you want to be in the driver's seat in general of the project's direction, or does that have another reason? Or
we don't take creative ownership or the IP or anything like that.
Exactly.
But we just like to be accountable and responsible, and putting all our cards on the table.
Skin in the game. Yep.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about the stagnation of ideas and original IP? I mean, as an agency, what we normally see is that it's very hard nowadays to fund new original IP. I mean, doing original IP is super hard, as we all know, and we see that a lot of publishers prefer to do sequels or prequels or whatever, or spin-offs. Sam, Kowloon obviously is super active in finding those original IPs and helping to evolve them. Anything you want to share on how you approach this and what is important for you when looking at original IP?
Yeah, so so far we have 18 games, and I think all of them are original IP. So there's no sequel or big IP attached to those games. So we do value a lot of the creative voice of the project when we select projects. So and I think that's why we end up with all these original IPs. So when we talk about creative voice, it can be visually distinctive. It could be some gameplay innovation. Some of the games have very interesting of genre mashing. So yeah, it's we do value a lot being innovative, and not just we have actually seen games that we're pretty sure they can make money, but it's because it may just be a reskin of another very successful indie game or a genre that's coming up that we actually decide to turn down, although we think that it will probably be profitable.
Yep. Alberto, obviously, Bandai Namco being a Japanese company which owns a lot of great IP, you have been very successful with, for example, Little Nightmares, with Tarsha Studios based here in Malmo. Any key learnings from that
Sure.
approach?
Bandai Namco strategy, I guess every company has a different one, but Bandai Namco strategy is to grow our Western portfolio. We are clearly a giant in the Japanese ASEAN markets, and what we want to have is more Western content. The case of Tarsier, the case of the Dark Pictures from Supermassive that we will be launching very soon, and all the other IPs that we are launching that will be disclosed in the following months, basically show the will of Bandai Namco to grow in the Western world. Original IP is a must for us, it's a nice to have, and we are willing to grow IPs because we believe that being an 8,600 plus employee company, we can provide really good service when we talk about a 360 exploitation. We can provide really a huge value added when we talk about not only video games but expanding to all the world of entertainment, which is why we're called Bandai Namco Entertainment. So on that side, I think that again, going back to my before assessment of we are truthfully flexible. Okay, we would be looking for some things, and of course, IP ownership or building original IP is one of the things that you will see that we will be very active in the future.
All right.
Yeah, it's becoming more challenging, you're right, but it's also very rewarding when you do it. So I think for any publisher that likes working on various IPs, and we do relatively work on different IPs, and we like building new IPs. We've done that so far, and we will continue to do so.
Good.
Obviously, it takes a lot of challenges, a lot of strengths, a lot of also work, and from any perspective, from brand building to marketing to any perspective. But I think it can still be done. It's something that some developers have really shown that themselves can do it.
Yep.
So we should continue that pattern, I think.
Great.
Yeah, like the whole mission of Searchlight is to build new IP. And it's not the easiest thing in the world, no. But I don't think the continuation, a successful running of a brand, of an IP, is any easier either, really. I think that's got its own challenges. And I don't think it's a bad thing. Like, when I was a gamer, as a teenager, or before that, Gran Turismo, I was just like looking forward to the next one, and it just never came. But eventually it would come, right? And it's just like, so when you've got an experience that people are really engaged with, continuing to provide that and update it for them, I think that's a great service to provide. So I don't think it's a bad thing to continue building franchises. And the whole point of Searchlight is to build a new IP and build a new franchise and turn it into a massive brand. So, the next Toes of War, the next Sonic, or the next whatever it is. And to build that momentum, to get that initial uptake, it takes some expertise and a lot of effort and focus. But I think, yeah, it's a good challenge.
Definitely. So we talked about like IP ownership, right? And funding original IP and enabling the developer to retain that IP. As an agency, we're definitely seeing a shift in the developer investing more in their own game and actually going to a publisher once the game is in a more advanced state to make sure they own IP. I know for Bandai it's always a sensitive topic because owning IP, especially with the Japanese heritage as a company, owning IP is very important. So what are basically the requirements of a developer for the publisher to allow them to own the IP? So basically what I'm asking is, are there ways that you would allow the developer to own the IP?
For sure. I mean, again, if we go back for the CD Projekt deal, we don't have any kind of IP ownership in that deal. Okay, so I think that this is much more about building the partnership properly. No, I mean, it goes on how much you fund. I mean, what is the percentage you fund? It goes on what is the total budget. It goes on what is the involvement and what is the potential exploitation of the IP in the long term. And it goes much more there in the sense that it would be a pity that just because you leave the IP ownership in a developer side, you are not able to exploit it at 100%. And you are not able to do all the entertainment, all the merchandise, all the IP, all the exploitations that Bandai Namco has specialized during the last 50 years in doing. So that's a bit of a negotiation with the developers. And again, I go back to my first statement, which as long as you find a fair win-win settlement where everyone is comfortable with, IP ownership exactly. IP ownership at the end of the day is one part of the balance, but there are many more things, and you can always do fair deals in terms of IP ownership that at the end of the day will revest in a successful business.
Yep. Sam, is that a hard requirement for Kowloon once you invest in a certain project or an IP that the developer retains the IP? Is that like something you put in a contract, or at least is that like part of the deal?
So for us, we never take any IP. So, I mean, the developers own their own IPs. It's in our principle that, again, we want the spotlight to go back to the developers. They should own the IP. If the game is successful, they want to make a sequel, we actually don't even own the sequel right. If they want to come back to us, that's great, but they don't have to. So it's because, I think also because we are very hands-off in our approach compared to most publishers. So there are, I mean, other than funding, we help them on some of the business negotiation with platform and all that. But other than that, we are mostly hands-off. So, and because we are hands-off, we're actually not involved much in the IP creation process. That's why we believe that the developer should take the whole IP. We shouldn't take any of that.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that IP ownership is important for everyone, to the developer and to the publisher. So at the end of the day, it's all about, what you feel confident in agreeing with the developer, and it needs to be, we need to be flexible these days, as Alberto was saying, and it's about finding the right pattern and the right compromise or the right agreement that makes everybody happy. Then it can change on case-by-case basis.
And luckily there are good deal structures, right? So how to structure either co-owned IP or fully. I mean, the thing is, there are multiple ways where the publisher can own the IP and where we have enough leverage to make sure that, for example, the publisher is not sitting on the IP. So you could, for example, have a clause that if the IP is not active, if the publisher is not active with the IP for, let's say, 10 years, that you have a first right to buy it or publish your own game, or there are multiple ways to structure that. Bobby, is there anything you want to add? Because I think for Sega, you also have different types of deals that you normally do, right? Or
yeah, so like with Searchlight, we've not taken IP in the deals that we've done, and we've talked about co-ownership of IP. Actually, that's an interesting one. We've talked about it, and on one occasion, the partner that we're talking to was like really keen on, like, yeah, that's like a really kind of, it's almost symbolic that we're in it together and it's a real partnership. But then when we really talked about it, it was like, yeah, but what happens when things go wrong? Like, like when we disagree on something, what's going to happen then? Who really owns it then, and what part of it does who own? And it became like really complicated. And we were like, look, you just keep it, man. You keep like people now. Let's keep it simple. And so yeah, but I don't know if there was like a really clever, like we should talk actually. If there's a clever way of doing it, it'll be interesting. I think that could be cool. But yeah, so we don't typically take it. Sorry, what was the question?
Well, basically, I mean, I asked like, what kind of deal structures do you see, right? And what do you
so we
ideally
don't take the IP, but we'll. Our intention is to build a brand together and have a long-term partnership. And the kind of publishing deal is our first step. And I always describe it as like dating. And so we're going to start dating knowing that we're going to get married eventually. So the publishing deal, you keep the IP, we'll work together, we'll see if it's a successful relationship, if the game's successful, and in every way it's a successful relationship. And if it really works, we'd like to acquire the studio. Exactly. And at that point, Sega obviously owns the IP. But then there'll be value in the studio, right? Because it's retained the IP at that point. And leading up to that point, we'll keep, unlike Kowloon, we'll keep all sequel, spin-off, like all those rights.
So first right of refusal, also last matching right, is that normally?
Yeah, usually we'll have first and last.
And then a first right to purchase the studio if they would be up for sale, or if someone would approach them, like Tencent or something. Yeah.
Definitely. Because the whole idea is we want to be there first, right?
Yeah, exactly. I still have a few questions, but we have around 10 minutes, so I rather now defer on you, the audience, to see if there are any questions you have. So because we still have 10 minutes and everyone is here to answer those questions. So are there like any questions you guys have, or any experiences? I know someone raising. Yep.
So when I talk to publishers now, many, maybe most of them, insist on multiplayer or games as a service, long tail stuff. Is that publishers driving the creative, or is that the creative or the audience driving the publishers, do you think? Or am I just wrong?
I don't think you're wrong. I mean, as an agency, we're seeing this definitely as well, that multiplayer is really important. And I know Michael, who's sitting there from Rockfish Games, sometimes hates that because they have a fantastic single-player game with Everspace. But now the big question is, are we going to include multiplayer or online for the sequel? But maybe, I mean, Alberto, maybe you want to elaborate on this, or whoever wants. Right?
Sure.
No, go for it.
Sure. I would rephrase probably your question, and going to answer, I would say that basically publishers, and in my opinion developers too, follow the trend of the market. And if the trend of the market now means that we feel that there are going to be hugely larger sales in many products, not all, by having multiplayer, well, I guess it's somehow logical that we introduce this in our process of negotiation in order to have it incorporated. And again, I want to insist, not in every case, not always, not from the beginning. So I think that goes much more to the specificity of every single deal. And as I mentioned before, in Bandai Namco, what we do is we analyze case by case, project by project. Maybe in some projects the multiplayer doesn't make any sense. Maybe in some projects it's not even worth it without it. So we can. I wish I could come back to you and tell you, look, this kind of projects, this kind of platforms, this kind of deal will for sure need a multiplayer, and these others don't. But I personally don't have a crystal ball that can define you. Look, this is how it goes. It is a trend, as Maarten is saying, for sure. It is a trend because consumers are demanding it, and we are all here to basically maximize the exploitation of all the projects.
Yep. Sam, if you look at Kowloon and your investments, is there like a percentage you can say, well, online versus single player? Is there like?
Yep, actually, I don't have the exact number, but out of the 18 games, most of them are actually single-player games. So we do believe that there's still a big market out there for single-player games. I think we, like Alberto say, right? We evaluate each game case-by-case basis. Some concepts are just much more suited for being a 5-10 hour single-player experience, and that's totally fine. Some experience, it can be much enhanced by adding multiplayer elements. That's also cool, right? And also, we think a bit about the budget as well. If you're pitching something, I don't know, in tens of millions and it's single player, it's probably a bit harder to get the funding you need, just because most of the top sellers will be multiplayer games, right? So maybe that's also why you've been talking to publishers that are asking for multiplayer. It's just the bigger games tend to be multiplayer, but there are plenty of smaller games with lower budget that are very, very successful, and that's totally okay.
Yep, cool. One question came in,
So I very much agree with the whole developer and publisher should be a partnership. Sometimes partnerships go wrong for whatever reasons. Is that something you could talk a little bit about? How does that happen? Does it happen often? Is it how awful is it? And how do you address it? How do you deal with it?
Okay, I'll take this one. Well, so with Searchlight, we've been around 3 years, and in the 3 years, we've only signed 3 games. And the reason why is we're really careful about which partner we work with. So we do a lot of due diligence before, and just as we do due diligence, the developer should be doing a due diligence on their partner, right? Which is what I was referring to earlier. But anyway, so because of that kind of whole process, we kind of know what we're getting into before we get into it. So we haven't really had like a massive issue so far, and fingers crossed, it'll continue to be great. And where we have had, this is an interesting one. I'm not sure if I should talk about it. Where we have had an issue, it's been really amicable. It's been really, really good. And so we've not really had like a massive breakup, as it were.
Well, one thing I would say, and it's maybe not like a direct answer to your question, but I would say what we always advise the developers we work with is be honest and transparent. Like we all know that game development is super, super hard. It's like pure R&D, and you never know if the game will work out and if it's really fun. But be honest to your partner. That applies to both publisher and the developer, but mainly, obviously, the developer needs to deliver based on a certain schedule. But if you see that things go wrong, or if you're not able to make it, just inform the publisher so that the publisher on their side can make the needed adjustments or arrangements. And then I think everyone is open to finding solutions. But if you're not honest and basically like, well, I'm not going to say anything, then you're not a good partner. And I think that's where it all comes down to, right? You want to be good partners, and that means, honesty and transparency. So.
Totally. Talking also about my case, we have not had unsuccessful cases in the last years. So we're lucky, but not only lucky, because as Sega is doing, we are very choosy. Our process of choosing and starting a partnership is taking months, and involving tons of people. So when we go to the signature, we'll basically have a lot of things about where the risk, knowledge about where the risks of this relation are, how can we do it, when can we expect to have the surprises arising, what are the milestones that will be more difficult, and when you have all of this from the very beginning, I feel it goes back to exactly what Maarten is doing, which is keep it honest. If you can do this, it's perfect. If you cannot do it, say it in advance. Normally, or in my personal experience, it has never been that you say something like, hey, I cannot do the game. okay, I cannot do this or I cannot do that. It's much more on the side of let's keep working on a daily basis, because that way basically by providing the services which are value added from the publisher, plus by providing the full creativity and work from the developer, in my experience, or at least from Bandai Namco, we don't finish wrongly. Actually, we've been quite happy with our track record in the last years.
Sam, how does this work for Kowloon? Because obviously you make very strategic investments, maybe games that are not going to see the daylight for 3-4 years, whatever. Yeah. Maybe never see the daylight. Is there any way you handle this, or any advice or any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the way again we work is quite hands off. So also similar to everyone, we are very selective about the partners we work with, not just the game, but we also, throughout the process of knowing each other, we really assess on whether the team is able to execute and what type of people they are and what preferences, etc. they have. But once we select the game, we become very hands-off. In our contract, you will say specifically, we don't make any pricing decision, release decision. You can work with publisher if you want, you can self-publish if you want. So with the freedom that we give, we are taking some risks. So, fortunately, we're still, none of that happened yet, any of the games not coming out. But, over the life, maybe some games will not do well at all for us. But that's why we have a portfolio approach with many different games in different genres across the world. So, even if some games don't work out, we make the bet on the team. We fully support them. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. There'll be other games that will work out fine for us.
Good risk mitigation. All right. Giovanna, anything to add? Or
no, not really. I mean, if there's openness and there is quite an open relationship and frankness on both sides, any problem can, or almost any problem can and should be resolved without getting into troubles for anyone. So I think that's the way.
Great. Any other questions?
What do you guys currently do about China? So what do currently Western publishers follow through in China?
I think this is a good question for you.
Yeah, we have 505 Games. Well, actually Digital Bros, who's the mother company. We have offices in China and we have a presence there since a few years now. And so we operate directly or through partners there by taking our games in China as well, through all the government approval and so on. Obviously, we talk to all partners that are there, to all companies that are there. I just learned that you knew our colleagues over there. So yeah, we're directly present, and it's a very interesting market. I'm not that aware about the market, but it's a very interesting one, big one, with many different companies. Some name, we all know them. Some are less known, but also very reliable. And it's, again, about relationship and building the relationship with people that are there. So we are...
Yeah, and without mentioning numbers, I mean, like Portal Knights has been doing really well in China, which is obviously a very Western game, and I think the sales like exceeded maybe like even in the West, right? I mean, it's doing really well in China.
I think we are happy with it.
Yeah,
yes.
It's a good indicator of
I don't exactly know what the status of the game, but I know we're doing well. I know that it's a franchise that, it's a franchise, an IP that we have successfully built all over the places, and also in China. So yeah, I mean, they're doing a good job.
Great.
And
anything for Bandai or Sega to add regarding China?
Sure. Bandai Namco has a full operation running in China. It's fully operative, and all our products are basically marketed and distributed through our Asian offices.
Yeah, Sega's got a presence in China, Korea, and obviously we're HQs in Japan. I'm actually going to have a meeting with our Asia team in Japan in a couple of weeks, for example. So we're always, all over it.
Cool.
Yep. And for us, for the games that we do fund, we do help link them up with the Asian publishers in general, so China, but also Korea, Japan.
Great. We have 1 minute. That means one final question, if someone has a question. Yep.
I was just wondering if you have like a rule of thumb when it comes to how long you think negotiations take from when you're interested in a project to when you sign. I mean, just trying to make a timeline that's realistic.
6 to 9 months.
6 to 9 months?
At least that's my average, what I normally use. I know Sometimes we've done a deal very quickly within a month.
Correct.
But I mean, it varies. But
for us, it's much faster. Our fastest deal was signed in 17 days.
Wow.
Longest one is like maybe 2 months. So usually when we receive pitches, we get back to the developer within 3 to 4 weeks after our review. If we're interested, then we start talking more, asking more questions about the game. If we're not interested, we also get back to the developer and let them know that we're not interested, or maybe just too early. So yeah, most deals are like 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks time, I think. Yeah,
that's really fast. I know obviously for Sega and for Bandai it's quite different because obviously you're a Japanese company, which means a hierarchy and going through different channels and getting all offices up to speed.
Truth. So it depends, but at the end of the day, it depends on the scope of the deal. There are some deals that we can close in 2 weeks. There are some deals that will take us 6 to 9 months, depending on many things, which are internal KPIs that we need to follow in order to get the proper layer of approvals. So I don't have a real rule of thumb for general. I think that depending on the scope of the deal, you can expect this amount of time, or that amount of time, or a different amount of time, which is normally linked to the size of the deal, the budget included, the timing, and the larger it is, the larger it would be our internal process.
Yeah.
But also, what stage of the production you get to see the pitch? Is it only on paper yet, or is there prototype, or so?
And how far
very much depends how far in the development.
How far are you in development?
We're working on our prototype, so
okay.
It will be ready until our prototype will be ready in what, September or October.
Yeah,
so.
then I would.
So
then
I guess what I'm asking is from prototype.
9 months. I mean, 6 months. I would say. I mean, that's maybe the minimum. But be conservative and just use 9 months.
Correct.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.